Representatives from more than a dozen countries met in the Gatineau Hills outside of Ottawa today to talk about progress and challenges in the war against ISIS. The meeting was co-hosted by Canada's Minister of Defence, Harjit Sajjan, and U.S. Defence Secretary James Mattis. There's no doubt the Islamic terrorist group has been pummeled on the battlefield, but it's not been completely erased and is digging in as perhaps a long-term insurgent force in Syria and Iraq. Canada is playing an active training role in Iraq against ISIS, but for how much longer? Harjit Sajjan is Canada's Minister of Defence. He joins me now. Minister, good to see you.
Great.
Thanks for coming to talk about this today. You co-hosted the meeting here in Canada with Secretary Mattis. What's the consensus on where you are in the fight against ISIS and Daesh?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important to talk about where we actually were, right? 3 years ago, when we formed government, ISIS controlled a significant amount of territory, both in Syria and in Iraq. And now, 99% of that has been taken away. But this took considerable effort, and our Prime Minister has always said that we need to be a responsible coalition partner, and the only way to do so, we need to make the right contributions. So we took a whole-of-government approach to this, and something that has actually served us very well in the coalition. And I'll tell you why. First of all, we knew that we had to deal with a direct threat. So the military effort was very important. We still have special forces on the ground there, and we've had those gains. But we also knew eventually we need to do a transition into the stabilization piece of where we're at now. This is why these meetings are so important. We got a good understanding where we're at. We can make the appropriate adjustments so that the Iraqi security forces can continue to maintain the stability in their country.
So the stabilization process is what? Give us a sense of what not just the Canadians, but others are trying to do there now. Now that ISIS has largely been defeated, but the presence is still there. So what are we doing?
Well, first of all, I just want to make sure that we don't get lulled in a false sense of security. We have taken away almost all of the territory that ISIS was able to control.
But
we need to make sure the remnants of it doesn't turn into insurgency. So that's that effort that we need to continue. Obviously, they want to still try to have efforts to grow. That stabilization piece is what we call whole of government, something that we as a government had announced very early on because we knew that military buys you time. And then we needed to look at, for example, the displacement of the Iraqis. Now that they're returning, 4 million are returning, and things are going well. But we know that the 1 million of them are coming back to destroyed homes. So that rehabilitation, stabilization needs to occur. The institution building is also important, hence one of the reasons why, in addition to the work that we have already been doing with the coalition, now with Canada, we're leading the NATO training mission. Because capacity building is essential to making sure that the Iraqi security forces will not be in a position as they were before. They can actually stand up against any future threats.
Will that, you talk about the NATO-led mission by Canada, 250 soldiers on the ground there and a support force of several other 100, I think 850 in total. Supposed to go until March, will it?
Well,
it's going till March. What about beyond March?
No, we've always said we were going to be a responsible coalition partner, but we'll make adjustments. It takes adjustments to making sure that we stay responsible. We committed to a one-year training mission with leading NATO, so this way, our support to this mission is unwavering. But we also, now what this meeting allowed us to do is have a good understanding of where we're at, and we'll make future adjustments, and then we'll make a decision as a government of what we're actually needed. What's very important is not just about...
Will you be there beyond March?
We will be making a decision shortly on this, but as I said, our government support for the security of the region is unwavering, but it takes the right decisions. We need to, not only us as a coalition partner need to have the right support, but we also have to make sure that the other nations as well, because the last thing you want is nations just to come in and offer things up. By looking at where the needs are, we're able to make the right decisions so that the coalition themselves can have all the right resources at the right time.
Okay, U.S. Defense Department report last month concluded that ISIS has a clandestine organization effectively taking hold in Iraq and Syria. And it prompts the question, I guess, of if that is the case, and we've sort of touched on it, how long do you think outside forces, perhaps including Canada, will be required, in our case particularly in Iraq, but in the region? How long do you think we'll have to be there?
Well, you can't put a timeline on it, for one thing. And you talked about the clandestine remnants, and this is something that we've been very cognizant of because that's the kind of regular evolution of these groups. This is one of the reasons why we put the right intelligence assets into the coalition as well, so that they can make better decisions from the targeting side. And we'll make adjustments to this. Our special forces are still working with the certain Iraqi security forces units in Mosul, and to making sure that through the Iraqi security forces, we're able to deal with these remnants. Because it's, even though this is what ICE is trying to do, we need to get ahead of the game, and we have been. But this requires good intelligence, but the right capacity building. But while we do this, we need to make sure that the stabilization period also begins. And that has started, but it's going to take more effort. And that transition period is absolutely critical right now. Because if we don't get this piece right, then what's going to happen is the last thing we want is this resurgence to get back to where it was before.
When you talk about the stabilization, you've talked about the institutional, but in terms of, right now what we're doing and others are doing, they're largely outside countries, is providing the security piece and rebuilding institutions. But what's involved in turning that security piece back to the Iraqis? I mean, give me some sense of what that involves, because clearly this is territory taken over by ISIS, and now so stability requires a rebuilding trust and faith in local security forces. Give me a sense of what the challenge is.
Well, in fact, actually, this goes back to the earlier discussion that we had when our government was making the decisions that we did, that we needed to do capacity building Iraqi security forces. So we never took the responsibility for the security. It's always been led by the Iraqi security forces, but we put the right support in. For example, the right advise and assist mission with the right units has helped the Iraqi security forces to be able to take on the operations. We provided the high-level capability for them to be able to do this work, and now as the capacity work now continues, they are able to do things more on their own. And so even though we've taken out all the territory, I would also have to say our actual military plan to take all the territory, we were actually 1 year ahead of schedule, which is a good thing. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to adjust quick enough. So this is not just about, we'll look at the right times when we need to pull military resources, and we'll only do so when they're not needed there. So, and we've made adjustments on this, but probably the bigger real question is what type of stabilization it needs to be done. And this is where Minister Freeland and Minister Bibeau play a very important role into this in terms of diplomacy, and the development work is probably even more critical now in the stabilization piece for the long term.
Let's finish on this. 700 foreign fighters now being held in Syria. Flip to Syria here. How many of them are Canadians?
Well, I think we should also look back. Look how many tens of thousands of foreign fighters that actually came into Iraq and Syria in the first place, and where we actually were on what threat that they actually
700 being prisoners, effectively being held in Syria.
Yeah. So when it comes to
how many of them are Canadian?
So I mean, I don't have the exact number for this, but we monitor this extremely closely. We have the right process in place to be able to look at our role that we play in this. But right now, what we are doing is making sure that we're focused with the Iraqi security forces themselves to not allow the remnants of Daesh to take hold.
And some of these Canadians being held in Syria, are they welcome back in this country if they fought for ISIS?
Well, we have a judicial process that we follow when it comes to these things. And Minister Goodell takes it extremely seriously and monitors the situation. For us, the military work that we're doing in Iraq, we work very closely. Anybody who we also train with, we go through a very rigorous process of making sure that international law is actually met, the proper human rights is done. And this is something that we've been very proud of from day one.
Okay, Canada's Minister of Defence, Harjit Sajjan. Good to talk to you. Thanks for coming by.
Great, thank you for having me.